in order to achieve that goal, you'll have to change some things in your life. You have to let go of relationships, your career, whatever it is. If you don't have direction, one thing that keeps us from being consistent is that. So I think I've talked about this before, but when I first started my fitness journey, and I'll show you guys some pictures of where I was when I first started, where I am now. But I really didn't have a good concept of the idea of consistency. I thought consistency was do or die. Like it was whether you showed up and you were 100% there every single day for however long it was, or it just didn't count. And that specific mentality was so detrimental for me in staying consistent when I first started working out and going to the gym. And this also relates to other areas of life, which we'll touch upon later. But specifically with going to the gym, it felt as if I didn't like go to the gym and execute my exercises perfectly and like was at 100% energy, it just wasn't even worth doing. So that would discourage me from going, and that led to not being able to see the progress that I wanted to see long term. And it wasn't until I changed my mentality towards consistency and started to look more long term that I was able to experience the changes that I really wanted to see in my fitness. So first thing that stops you from being consistent is a lack of clarity. So if you don't have clarity on what you want to achieve in life, whether it's your fitness, it's your finances, it's your relationships, your career, whatever it is, if you don't have direction, if you don't have clarity, then you're going to lack direction. And you're not going to know what you have to do every day in order to achieve your goals. So specifically in fitness, I remember when I first started, I really didn't have a specific goal that I wanted to achieve. There wasn't like a certain amount of weight I wanted to put on. There wasn't like a certain lift that I wanted to improve on. There just wasn't anything specific that I was working on. I was just going to the gym, basically kind of aimlessly, hoping that I would eventually see progress. And what I found is that that's just very discouraging. It's hard to stay consistent on a program where you really aren't working towards anything. So once I was able to dial in what I wanted to improve on, there's specific exercises that I wanted to get better at. There were specific exercises I wanted to get better at. There was like a certain weight that I was trying to achieve. There's also like a certain look that I wanted to achieve at some point. So once I started to have a visualization of these goals, then it made it very clear what I had to do. I was able to seek out the information, so I was able to quicken that process and achieve ultimately what I wanted to achieve, which was improving my overall health and well-being. So if you lack a goal, I would definitely suggest that that's where you start. Start by getting clarity. What do you want to improve on? Do you want to improve your cardiovascular fitness? Do you want to be able to walk up a flight of steps without being completely out of breath? Do you want to be able to run a marathon? Do you want to be able to bench 225? Do you want to be able to increase your mobility and flexibility? Like whatever it is, just get clear on whatever that goal is and then create benchmarks to show that you're actually making progress towards those goals. So if you don't have this, it'll be very difficult for you to stay consistent because you won't know what you're working towards. So there's this thing called the Goldilocks rule, which is popularized by famous author James Clear. The rule goes, humans experience peak motivation when working on tasks that are right on the edge of their current abilities. Not too hard, not too easy, but just right. So the second reason why it's probably hard for you and me, all of us, to remain consistent is that we just have unrealistic expectations on what we want to achieve. The first step was getting clear on our goal. Second step is going to be setting realistic expectations, because I believe that a lot of people just approach like fitness or life in general with grandiose ideas of what we want to achieve. Oh, I want to lose 100 pounds in like the next 3 months. I want a 6-pack abs in 2 weeks or whatever it is. And the reality is like, it's just not really, I don't want to say it's impossible because it is possible, like in very extreme circumstances, but it's not sustainable. And that's the problem. Consistency only works if you plan for long term. If it's only working for the short term, then it's not really even consistency at that point. So you want to be able to create systems that will keep you consistent over the next 5, 10, 10, 15, 20 years of whatever it is, the action that you're committing to do. And also what I'll add is that you should make sure that the action that you're committing to is doable / easy enough to where you can do it on the days where you don't feel like being consistent. So that kind of ties into like what I've talked about earlier about if you're feeling discouraged and you don't want to like go work out or do whatever it is you committed to do, you just tell yourself that you're just going to do one. You're just going to do one push-up. You're just going to do one lap. You're just going to do one set. And by the time you start doing that one of whatever it is that you committed to do, you'll find that's easier to get back into the flow of doing the rest. Even if you don't do it 100%, it's still progress. It's still consistency because you showed up. So a lot of people think that over the term of being consistent on a thing, it also involves having the same amount of intensity, but that just couldn't be further from the truth. Like there are days where I show up to the gym and just like my slides and like just anything, and like I just show up and I just start working out despite not having like the same gear that I usually will pull up with if I'm like doing like a super intense gym session. And that's okay. Like that's still part of consistency. That's still part of the process. I'm still experiencing progress. It's just not looking the way that I might have imagined it in my head. And that's perfectly fine. The most important thing is just that I showed up and I did what I was going to do. And I'm building that muscle of consistency while also avoiding burnout and discouraging myself from wanting to continue in the future. Also, I'll just add that moving something from 0 to 1 is extremely difficult. To move from having no progress to having just a little bit of progress, it takes time. But what you'll find is that with compounding and with consistency, which comes from, or the compounding effect, which comes from consistency, you'll find that to get from 0 to 1 might have been difficult, but to get from 1 to 10, 10 to 20, 20 to 100, that process is a little easier because you've already established the systems, and then you're also compounding on the progress that you've made before. So just getting over that initial hump at times can be very difficult, but once you've gotten past that hump, the progress that you experience after can be exponential. So next on the list is definitely going to be shiny object syndrome. I don't know if you guys have experienced this like I have, but I feel like I can definitely get into times where I see a different opportunity and it looks better than what I'm working on now. So then I switch up and I start to work on that opportunity. And the problem with the shiny object syndrome is that you never really make progress on your goals because you're not staying consistent on one thing. So let's say you wanted to start a YouTube channel or you wanted to start a blog and someone else comes out with this new like AI opportunity and like you're looking at that opportunity like, oh, that might be my big break. But the ironic thing is that if you just stayed consistent on what you're already doing, then you would probably see a lot more progress in that front than if you kept jumping around on different things. There was actually an interesting study on people who were able to lose a extreme amount of weight and keep it off for a long period of time. They basically asked them, what diet were you on that allowed you to be able to lose all this weight? Or what was your workout plan? What was your regimen? Were you doing the low carb diet? Were you doing the Mediterranean? And what they found is that the common denominator between all the people who were able to lose an extreme amount of weight and keep it off for a long period of time was that they just remained consistent with the same thing. Whether it was the low carb diet, whether it was the Mediterranean diet, whether it was they were doing high intensity interval training, or whether they were doing weightlifting or running, what they did is that they just stayed consistent in what they were doing for a long period of time, and that allowed them to be able to maintain the progress that they had. So instead of jumping from one thing to another, it's better to just commit to the same thing and just do that for a long period of time, and I'm sure you're going to see results. It was a beautiful day, so I had to come outside to make the next point. Let me show you guys the view. Beautiful view of the city. It's like good weather, you know, to the point where it's like not super humid. It's just like warm and nice. Okay, so for the next point, this kind of relates to the last one, but I would say that one thing that keeps us from being consistent is that we are unwilling to sacrifice other pursuits in pursuit of the main thing that we really want to accomplish. So let's say if your goal is to get in the best shape of your life, what else in your life are you willing to give up in order to achieve that? So for example, let's say you want to get in the best shape of your life. The things that might be conflicting with that is your after work routine. So let's say you get home and your usual routine is to sit on the couch and like decompress, watch TV and eat dinner. That that's fine, but is that in alignment with what you actually want to achieve in regards to getting into the best shape of your life? So in order to achieve that goal, you'll have to change some things in your life. You have to let go of watching the next Netflix series or prioritizing that. You can still watch it, but it might not have the highest priority in your life because there are other things that you want to really achieve. And I could definitely relate with that because in my life, there's so many different things that I want to pursue and so many things that I want to achieve, but I had to get real with myself and ask, what are the things that will actually move the needle in regards to what will actually make me feel fulfilled in life? Some things had to fall off because I got really clear on what I actually want to achieve. And also this relates to the first point where you might lack clarity, but once you're able to cut off a lot of these different distractions and get clear on the one thing that you want to achieve, then your action becomes aligned with that, and it becomes a lot more clear and easy to know what you have to do next because you've cut off all the other things that aren't in alignment with that goal. And I just think that's very important for us to get clear on those specific things and not allow them to be conflicting, because once you get into that space where it's conflicting, then you're not going to be making progress on any of them. And then the things that you really want to achieve in life, especially if it's regarding fitness, then you might not be able to see the progress that you want to see on that. So for example, let's say your goal is to get into the best shape of your life. That might conflict with other things that are also important to you. Let's say you enjoy playing games or you like watching Netflix shows. It might conflict with that goal of finishing the next Netflix series or leveling up in the video game. But what you have to do is get very clear on what's most important to you. In 10, 15 years down the line, is finishing that Netflix show or leveling up in that game going to be more important than what you were able to achieve by being consistent with your health? That's something that I had to come to terms with in my life, because after I get home from work, there's a limited amount of time to do a lot of the things that I want to do. I had to ruthlessly cut off the things that weren't really pertinent to what I want to achieve over the next 10, 15 years. So that means I'm not watching TV as much, I'm not playing games as much, I'm not relaxing as much, but that's because I'm sacrificing those things in order to achieve the goals that I actually want to achieve, which is being in great health, being sound physically, mentally, spiritually, so I can enjoy the fruits of that in the future. But if I didn't get clear on what my actual goals were and who I wanted to be in the next 10, 15 years, and this is a constant pursuit, I'm not saying I'm perfect, but if we don't get clear on that, then it's likely that we won't achieve or be the people that we want to be in the next 15 years, whether it's that in all areas of life, specifically now fitness. So I would just say that you'll have to cut off some other things or reduce them. You'll have to do it a little bit less. You might have to watch half a TV show. You might have to only play a game for 30, 45 minutes, but you just also have to remember that you're making time for something that's also equally, if not more important to you, where you'll be happy that you did in the future and proud of the progress that you've made. Okay, so last on the list is going to be, what is the story that you're telling yourself about yourself? And I believe I talked about this in an earlier video, but a lot of us get into cycles and patterns about the stories that we're telling ourselves about ourselves in regards to our fitness and our consistency. So if the story that you're always telling yourself is that I'm not a committed person, I'm not a consistent person, fitness isn't something that's important to me, this isn't something I'll be able to achieve. If that's a pattern that you're always repeating, then you're going to execute that in real life. So you have to take a catalog of what you're telling yourself about yourself and begin to change those stories. I remember when I was first working out, I told myself that this isn't something that I can be consistent with. And it wasn't until I read the book Master the Day by Alexander Haney that it really shifted my entire perspective on consistency and began to change the story that I was telling myself. And it wasn't an easy process, but as time began to progress and I began to be more consistent and have a better relationship with working out and going to the gym and remaining consistent, that's when that story began to change. And it was an active process, but also a passive process, just as I began to execute on the things that I said I was going to do. And it just became ingrained into my personality to where I'm not even really thinking about it or having to actively change that story anymore. Now it's just who who I believe I am. But it started first from identifying the story that I was telling myself and then changing that story, and then also following through on the actions that would allow me to change that story in my head as well. So get clear on that. If you have to write it down, if you have to do some serious reflection and figure out what it is holding you back, then I would suggest you do that, because like I said, this is a long-term play. This isn't like a 2-month or 3-month like get jacked or get in shape scheme and then after those 3 months you stop or fall off. This has to be a complete shift in your mentality and just how you relate with yourself and what you believe about yourself, because that's when it'll become ingrained in your personality, and then it will just be something that you do, kind of like brushing your teeth or taking a shower. It'll feel wrong if you're not doing it, and that just comes from changing your mentality and identifying these stories and making sure that these stories, instead of hurting you, actually serve you and help you to achieve your goals. Because a lot of this fitness stuff and also just life in general, I feel like a lot of it's more mental than anything. Yes, you can go through and do the actions, but if you don't have a shift in your mentality and understand why you're doing what you're doing and really systemize it in a way where it's sustainable, then I feel like it's just, you just fall back into your old patterns. So learning how to shift your mentality, make sure that these things are serving you, is key, so key in order to see long-term progress. All right, y'all, if you made it this far in the video, I appreciate you. I am a small channel just trying to get started and hopefully shed some positivity out there in the world. So if anything in this kind of resonated with you, go ahead and hit the like button, drop a comment, subscribe. That would be much appreciated. And I'll be sharing more of just the things I did to change my mindset in order to see lasting progress in regards to my fitness journey and other areas of life. So yeah, I appreciate you, and I'll see you guys in the next video.